A most original and creative talent in our business. Would you welcome Mr. Orson Welles?
Ladies and gentlemen, Orson Welles again, come to call for another visit.
Good evening. This is Orson Welles.
Stay tuned.
Right after this episode.
For our discussion.
Good evening, this is Orson Welles, your producer of a special series of broadcasts presented by the makers of Pabst Blue Ribbon, the Mercury Summer Theater of the Air.
Tonight and every Friday night, Pabst Blue Ribbon presents you with a front row seat at one of the greatest plays ever produced. So, while America's famous producer, writer, director, Orson Welles entertains you, pour yourself a tall, frosted glass of Pabst Blue Ribbon and enjoy at the same time great theater and this truly great beer.
33 fine brews blended into one great beer. 33 fine brews blended.
This evening, Mr. Welles and the Mercury Players bring to the microphone the great romance by Alexander Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo.
Mercedes?
Yes, Bernard?
May I present the most talked-of men in Paris? The Count of Monte Cristo, the Baroness Mondego.
I am deeply honored.
Count of Monte Cristo.
What is it, Mercedes? Are you ill?
It's nothing, Fernand. Will you give me your arm, Count Monte Cristo?
I am honored, madame.
Is it true, Count, what everyone is saying about you?
What are they saying, madame?
That you've seen so much, traveled so far, and suffered so deeply.
I have suffered deeply, madame. Long ago, I loved a girl. I thought she loved me well enough to wait for me, and even to remain faithful to my grave. When I returned, she was married.
You have forgiven her for all she made you suffer?
I have forgiven her.
Do you still hate those that separated you? Do you still want to punish them?
They will be punished, madame. But it is not I who will punish them. It is their own past. Rarely has European society been more intrigued than it was in the winter of 1834 when the mysterious Count de Monte Cristo appeared in the city of Paris. Of the title of this man, nothing was known that winter save that he derived it from a small and uninhabited island off the coast of Corsica. The source of his fortune was equally obscure, and it seemed inexhaustible. Yet it was not his wealth alone that made him remarkable. At a dinner party that winter, a woman was heard to say that the Count of Monte Cristo had the look of a man who had been enclosed for a long time in a tomb. I heard her say it, and no man but I could know how truly the lady had spoken. If to live in darkness for 20 years, in darkness and silence, underground and alone, if this is to dwell in a tomb, then the Count of Monte Cristo had dwelt in a tomb. I alone can speak of these things, for I alone know the true name of the Count of Monte Cristo. It is mine. It is Edmond Dantes. The story of Edmond Dantes begins in 1814, the year the Emperor Napoleon was a prisoner in Elba. It begins with a wedding.
Who here answers to the name of Edmond Dantes?
What do you want of him?
Edmond Dantes, in the name of the law, I arrest you.
Arrest me? What have I done?
Officer, he's done nothing wrong. Edmund.
Squad, attention! Forward, march!
Edmund! Edmund!
You are the king's prosecutor, sir?
I am de Villefort. It is reported that your political opinions are extreme.
Well, lass, I've never had any opinions. I'm hardly 20, sir. I was to be married today.
What do you make of this? It's a letter, Monsieur Dantes.
A letter?
Read it.
The king's prosecutor is hereby informed by friends of the throne and religion that one Edmund Dantes, mate of the ship Pharaoh, arrived this morning from Smyrna, having touched at the Isle of Elba. He's been entrusted by the usurper Napoleon with a letter to the Bonapartist committee. Well, I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand it.
Is there any truth in this accusation?
No, sir. I swear by my honor as a sailor.
Go on.
When my captain lay dying, he gave me a package to be delivered on the island of Elba.
What did you do with it?
What any man would have done in my place, sir. Exactly what my captain told me to do.
Officer,
Your Honor?
you will hold this man until further notice in prison at the Chateau d'If.
The Chateau d'If.
Dantes! Haven't you slept?
I do not know.
Are you hungry?
I do not know.
Do you want anything?
I want to see the governor. The governor. I'm innocent. Innocent. I am innocent. In darkness and silence, underground and alone, every day, twice a day, morning and evening, the jailer came to my cell and put down the vile food and went away without speaking to me. My hair and nails had grown long, and my skin was white as a leper's. I had been proud the first month. Now I began to beg. Nothing was granted. I spoke to the jailer when he brought me my food. He rarely answered me. I tried to speak when alone, but the sound of my own voice terrified me. After what must have been 3 or 4 years, the governor of the Chateau d'If was transferred. The new man did not trouble to learn my name. I was no longer Edmund Dantes. I was number 37. Then I began to think of dying. I swore I would starve myself to death. So every morning and every evening I threw out all the food the jailer brought me, at first gaily, then thoughtfully, then with regret. I held the plate in my hand for an hour at a time, gazing at the morsel of bad meat, of tainted fish, of black and moldy bread. One day, I found I had not sufficient force to throw my supper out of the window. The next morning, I could hardly see or hear. I knew I was dying. And suddenly, a little after dark, I heard a hollow sound in the wall against which I was lying. I sat up and listened. It was a continuous scratching, as if made by a huge claw, or some iron instrument scraping against the stones. Then all was silent. Soon it began again, nearer and more distinct. Perhaps it was only a workman repairing a neighboring dungeon. I would soon find out. The sound continued. With my earthenware jug, I knocked against the wall where the sound came. Each time I knocked, the knocks were repeated on the other side of the wall. When I stopped knocking, the other also stopped. After that, there were no more sounds. The night passed in complete silence. I never closed my eyes. 3 days passed, 3 long days, and never a sound. At last, on the 4th evening, whoever it was quite close to me now. I wanted desperately to help him, but I had nothing, no knife or sharp instrument. I smashed my earthenware jug. And that night, I moved my bed out from the wall. Moved it out from the wall and started to scrape the plaster with a piece of the broken jug. Soon the fragments of plaster began to fall away. In 3 days, I uncovered a large stone. And the next day, about noon, the stone began to move. Oh, my God. My God. Don't fail me now.
Who talks of God in this place?
Speak again. In the name of heaven, speak.
Who are you?
A prisoner.
How long have you been here?
Since the 28th day of February, 1815. And you?
Since 1804. 20 years.
All that night we worked. And then, just before dawn, a portion of the floor in my cell gave way. And from the bottom of this passage, the depth of which was impossible to measure, appeared the head, then the shoulders, and lastly, the body of a man. In the prison, he was known as the Mad Priest. I never learned his name. For 8 years, we saw each other every day. Using the tunnel he had dug through the solid rock, concealing the mouth of the passage with stones carefully fitted into place. By the sundial he had traced on the wall of his cell, we knew the hours of the guard's visit. The rest of the time we were together. He had been a great scholar in his day, and all that he knew, he taught me with loving patience, day after day, year after year. Then one morning I found him standing in the middle of his cell, pale as death.
Quick, Dantes, quick.
Yes, Father?
Listen to what I have to say.
What is it, Father?
I'm dying. Help me to my bed. You see, half my body is paralyzed already.
Yes.
Careful, careful.
Yes, Father.
Thank you, my son. Now, listen to me.
Yes.
All is over with me. This night or tomorrow I shall be dead.
Oh, but Father...
Before I die, there is something I want to give you. Here, look. It is nothing but a half-burned piece of parchment. But have you ever heard of the great Spada treasure?
Spada treasure? I've heard sailors talk of it.
That paper you have in your hand is what is left to the will of Cardinal Spada, murdered by Rodrigo Borgia. Now, take the paper and put the two pieces together.
Yes.
Read.
April 1498. I declare to my nephew, Guido Spada, my sole heir, that I have buried in a cave of the island he knows all that I possess of ingots, gold, monies, jewels, and diamonds, which treasure may amount to nearly 10 millions of Roman crowns. 10 million crowns?
Now, my son, with my dying breath, I leave this treasure to you. You must claim it. If ever you are free, you must go to the island of Monte Cristo.
2 days later, in fearful agony, he died. I closed his eyes and laid him out to rest as well as I could. And the next morning, while I lay hidden in the cell, 2 guards came and brought an old sack in which to bury him. Then they went away for a stretcher. Quickly, I unlaced the sack, drew out the corpse of the priest, and carried it through the tunnel to my cell. I laid it out on my bed, turned the head to the wall, and covered it with a sheet. And for the last time, I kissed the ice-cold brow. Then went back to the dead man's cell. I could hear steps in the passage as the guards came back with a stretcher. Quickly, I got into the sack in the place of the corpse. I laced the sack around my body. I lay stiff, hoping they would not hear the beating of my heart.
Here we go. You take the head, I'll take the feet. All right. Up she goes. I've got him. Here we go.
Funny thing, you feel him through the sack? Him dead 12 hours and he's still warm.
Hold him while I open this door.
All right.
Oh, Lord, it's cold up here. This'll cool him off. Have you got the lead weight?
Here it is.
Tie it on around his feet.
All right.
That's right. Tight.
And now see if you can make it any tighter.
That's all right. That'll sink him, all right. All right, now. Are you ready? 1, 2.
Wait a minute. Get nearer to the edge. The last one was smashing on a rock and we got the blame for it.
All right, then. Come on. Ooh, I'm freezing. Let's go.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Orson Welles bringing you The Count of Monte Cristo, a Mercury Summer Theater production. You've just heard the first half of it. Our whole Mercury cast tonight is mainly recruited from over on 54th Street from the Adelphi Theater. From the Mercury's latest production, the musical extravaganza Around the World. Stefan Schnabel, Brainard Duffield, Guy Spall, who are severally responsible for Edmund Dante's downfall tonight, have lots to do with the success of Around the World. Mercedes, the lovely Mercedes, is the same lovely actress who appears every night as Molly Muggins over and Around the World, and Julie Warren is her name. Julie Warren, you'll be running into that name often from here on in. Well, here it is, intermission time. In any summer theater, time for a brief meander in the moonlight, a smoke, a chat on such vital matters as suntans and golf scores, and just time enough for a nice, tall, frosted glass of... Where is Ken Roberts? He's supposed to come in at this time to say Pabst Blue Ribbon. I'll say it for him. Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Mr. Wells, the Count of Monte Cristo never spoke more romantic words. For what blends more beautifully with a June evening than blended, splendid Pabst Blue Ribbon? And for a very good reason. Every single drop of this truly great beer is always the satisfying result of careful blending. Yes, only by blending never less than 33 fine brews can Pabst create that perfectly blended flavor. Not too light, not too heavy, but fresh, clean, sparkling, with the real beer taste coming through just the way you like it. Only by this famous blending process can Pabst give you that remarkable Pabst Blue Ribbon smoothness. Friends, these days, when occasionally your dealer may be unable to supply you with all the Pabst Blue Ribbon you'd like, please keep on asking. For remember, as always, you'll enjoy the same flavor, the same smoothness, the same blended, splendid Pabst Blue Ribbon.
33 fine brews blended into one great beer. 33 fine.
This is Orson Welles again, ladies and gentlemen, and just time for the second act curtain of The Great Romance by the great romancer Alexander Dumas, an old Mercury favorite, The Count of Monte Cristo. In September 1834, there appeared in Marseille a man of about 40, of a pallor that was almost livid. He gave the impression of one who had been enclosed for a long time in a tomb. This man inquired for a tailor of the city called Caderousse.
My name is Caderousse, monsieur.
There are a few questions I'd like to ask you, Monsieur Caderousse. In the year 1814, did you know a young sailor by the name of Dantes?
Dantes? Yes. Why do you ask? Is he alive?
He died in prison, and with his last breath gave me the names of the people here who were his friends. One of them is you, Caderousse. The second is a man called Danglars.
Danglars?
The third, a certain Fernand Mondiego.
Mondiego?
You know these men?
Know them. Do you realize who sent Dantes to prison?
No, tell me.
Two men who were jealous of him. One for love and one for ambition. Mondiego and Danglars.
I thought these two were his friends.
They denounced him as a traitor. They knew he had a letter from Napoleon in exile. Something his dying captain had given him, and it looked bad.
Which of the two denounced him?
Both. Danglars was the sharp one. He wrote the letter, and Mondiego put the letter in the post.
But why was this Danglars jealous of him?
He wanted his job.
I see.
They were mates together on the same ship. When the old captain died, and the owners made young Dantes captain, Danglars never forgave him.
The other, this Mondiego. What did he have against Dantes?
A girl Dantes was engaged to marry. When Mondiego got his chance to get young Dantes out of the way, he took it.
I see. And what happened to those two, Danglars and Mondiego?
Where have you been, my friend? Danglars is a millionaire, has a banking house of his own. Baron Danglars, he calls himself now. And Mondiego's a baron, too, with a home in Paris a block wide. They've done pretty well for themselves, they have.
And this girl, the girl Edmund Dantes was betrothed to.
Mercedes?
Yes. Yes, that's her name.
When Dantes was arrested, she was nearly mad with grief. Pitiful it was. 6 months and no news of him. But still she waited and still no word from him. Then, in the end, after a year, she married Mondiego. And now she is one of the greatest ladies in Paris.
A year? She waited a year. Monte, Danglars de Villefort. Monte, Danglars de Villefort. Ali!
Yes, master.
Ali, here are 100,000 francs. Spare no expense. Find out everything there is to know about these three. Every move they've made.
Yes, master.
Find out about their homes, their wives, their children, friends.
Yes, master.
Find out where they got their power, how they made their money, whom they robbed, whom they cheated, whom they murdered. One day in November, Baron Danglars of the banking house of that name received a visit from a new client.
I have the honor of addressing the Count of Monte Cristo.
You have, Baron Danglars.
I have a letter of credit in your name, sir. But according to this letter, the Count of Monte Cristo is to have unlimited credit.
And what is there in that simple fact that requires explanation?
Merely that, unlimited. I assure you, should you at any time be hard-pressed, were you even to require 1,000,000 francs...
1,000,000? My dear sir, excuse my smiling when you speak of a sum that I am in the habit of carrying in my pocketbook.
Well, I admit I'm hardly accustomed
If
to...
you would prefer not to handle this account, Baron, you need have no scruples in declining.
I assure you I never entertained...
You merely wish to be convinced that your stockholders ran the risk. I understand, Baron, they include some of the greatest names in France. The Duke de Monte, the Baron de Villefort.
It is not generally known that these gentlemen...
Of course. Now we understand each other. I should like to draw tomorrow the sum of, shall we say, 6 million francs. Half gold, half notes.
6,000,000 francs. As you say, sir.
If I should require more, I will let you know. Oh, and by the by, purchase me tomorrow 10,000 shares of Austrian Commonwealth.
You have some information about this stock?
You will find, sir, that I never gamble, except in certainties.
Monte. You're late, Villefort. I hope it's something good this time, Danglars. We need it. Just arrived. A private message for the Count of Monte Cristo.
Does he know we intercept his messages, Danglars?
Who cares? A secret treaty has been signed tonight. Anglo-Italian shares due sharp rise. Buy all available shares.
Well?
We are going to buy.
Danglars, I'm worried. Everything we've touched has gone wrong lately. Those Belgian bonds we bought, we lost 500,000 on them.
We've got to plunge, gentlemen. If it were not for the Count of Monte Cristo's deposits, we have been bankrupt. If that money should be called for today or tomorrow or the next day, this bank is ruined.
Danglars, I don't see what that has to do with us.
You don't? Well, if I go, you go, all of you. Now then, I propose to buy every share of Anglo-Italian that comes into the market.
With what?
My friends, you forget. The Count of Monte Cristo has 16 million francs on deposit in this bank.
And what about this message of his? Does the Count of Monte Cristo get to see it?
This message, gentlemen, was lost in transmission.
Rarely has Paris been more intrigued than it was that winter by the mysterious Count of Monte Cristo. It was at the end of December that a great ball was given in his honor by the Baron Danglars.
De Monte Cristo?
Contessa de Monte.
We have missed you.
In so short a time, madame.
A strange thought occurs to me.
Yes, madame?
It seems to me that you've been gone longer than I can say. It's an odd idea, Count, but I cannot shake it off.
You must forgive me, Madame Monte. I have an appointment with your husband.
Tell me who you are.
Madame, I am the Count of Monte Cristo. And the world is mine.
Congratulations, Danglars. A good day's work. How much did we buy of Anglo-Italian? 62,000 shares. Who was selling? I don't know. Couldn't find out.
Baron Danglars?
Yes?
The Count of Monte Cristo would like a word with you.
Tell him I can't see him.
Good evening, gentlemen. A delightful party. I hope I don't intrude. Danglars, de Villefort, Monte. How fortunate, gentlemen. I'm here to say goodbye to all three of you.
Bye.
I have decided to leave Paris for a while, perhaps forever. Before I go, there are certain things I have left to do. Baron Danglars, my credit on your books as of tonight is 16 million francs. There's about 4 million to cover certain stocks I sold short today. Here is a check for 10 million francs made out for cash. I will take half in gold and half in notes.
But surely...
I beg your pardon?
Such a very large
Oh,
sum.
by the way, Baron, you may be interested to learn that less than an hour ago, Anglo-Italian went into liquidation.
But what that means?
It means that you three gentlemen are ruined. It means that you, Danglars, have robbed the poor and helpless for the last time.
I'll prosecute you for this. I'll issue a warrant for your arrest.
I don't think you will, Baron de Villefort. Since noon today, there has been in the hands of the Minister of Justice a complete record of the career of Baron de Villefort. Spy, thief, forger, informer.
Who are you?
Who am I? Still you do not know? I know you very well, Fernando Mondego. And tomorrow all Paris will know you for what you are. Deserter, traitor, murderer.
Who are you? What have we done to you?
You condemn me to slow death. You deprive me of love, of freedom, of happiness.
Stop! What is your name?
I have but to pronounce it to strike you to my feet. Look at me, Fernand Mondego. I am the specter of a wretch you buried in the dungeons of the Chateau d'If. You guess it now, do you not? Or rather, you remember it. For notwithstanding all my sorrows and my tortures, I show you now a face which the happiness of revenge makes young again. A face you must often have seen in your dreams since your marriage, Fernando Mondego, with Mercedes, my betrothed.
You
Yes! I am Edmond Dantes. Baroness Mondego.
Yes, Count.
Your husband has been detained. There are matters of urgency which will not permit him to leave this house. May I see you to your carriage?
Count Monte Cristo, I asked you a question. I wonder if your answer was the truth.
Madame.
The girl who made you suffer. I asked you if you'd forgiven her.
Oh, yes. I've forgiven her.
And those who separated you. Do you still wish to punish them?
Madame, they have been punished. But my answer is still the same. It is not I who punished them. It was their own past.
Orson Welles will be back in just a few seconds to tell you about next week's production of the Mercury Summer Theater. But first, the makers of Pabst Blue Ribbon wish to remind you that though you may not be able to get Pabst Blue Ribbon every time you want it in these days of grain restrictions, it is well worth your while to keep asking. For every bottle you do get will continue to live up to its name. There will be no cutting of corners, no lowering of standards of flavor or goodness, no compromise with quality. This truly great beer will be, as always, the happy blending of never less than 33 fine brews. As always, blended, splendid Pabst Blue Ribbon. Now, here is Orson Welles.
Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you a classic of radio, The Hitchhiker by Lucille Fletcher. At the same time next week, same station. Please join us. Until then, speaking for my sponsors, the makers of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, and for Bernard Herrmann, who composes and conducts our music, as always, and indeed for all of us in the Mercury Theater, I remain, as always, obediently yours.
This program came to you through the courtesy of the Pabst Brewing Company of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, makers of blended, splendid Pabst Blue Ribbon. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. We are presenting Orson Welles again, and this is the Count of Monte Cristo, which is from his Mercury Summer Theater that he ran for this one summer back in 1946. And this is, I think we're on our second or third episode of this. The Count of Monte Cristo well, the whole series I think is interesting because it's a half hour instead of the normal hour that you've gotten on Mercury Theater and Lux Radio Theater. I think it's this and trying to remember there's another one like Lux, but it's Screen Guild Theater, maybe, I think, maybe it's a half hour long. And it's always interesting to me. I'm almost more interested in these half hour ones just to see how are they going to present like a whole book in I mean, the editing you have to do is just tremendous. And I'm sure Terry will have more to share about how tricky that would be. But essentially you've got I've said before, you have about a minute worth of text for each, I mean, a page worth of text for each minute that you cover. So in a 30-minute thing, you're going to cover 30 pages of text. So 30 pages, you're bringing a book to you that maybe the book was originally hundreds and hundreds of pages, if not 1,000 pages, and then you're trying to condense that down, and it would be really tricky to see how to do that. But anyway, here we get an example of that. And today we have our Terry Phillips with us, who is our historian, just a great guy all around, and has a wonderful podcast out there of imaginary theater that you might want to check out and watch his shows and listen to them. They're on YouTube, they're on podcasts, they're everywhere. So go there. And we have Vincent Longo, who is our Orson Welles specialist and everything, really knows his Orson, and has his book coming out. What are we looking at? Maybe next fallish or winter, or when are you thinking?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll either be late this year or early next year. That's what it's looking like so far. Yep, just wrapping things up.
Oh, nice. And then we have John Henderson over there from This Day in Jack Benny, wonderful program that he does. I listened to one of yours, and you were talking about this summer. You and your wife were talking, and I love it when she's on. She's got a great voice. Anyway, so yes. They were talking about this summer, and you were saying this summer you were going to continue to just do episodes to kind of catch up. And there's so many episodes to do of Jack Benny. There's 700 and some existing radio shows that John was saying it's going to take him 20 years to get through all of them. So he's like, okay, if I use the summer, I can get through them a little faster. So that makes sense. Yeah. Great, John. And then we have Catherine Fuller-Seeley here, who is our Jack Benny specialist and historian, and just has a new Jack Benny book coming out very soon. Back to Orson. So this episode is Count of Monte Cristo. Interesting episode. And let's go around and see what folks thought about it and anything that you want to point out about it. I believe, let's go to Vincent first. He's still using his cast from the play that he's doing, and maybe you can go into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. So Wells is recording these in New York while he's still on Broadway with Around the World, which was his first adaptation for this series. And so, yeah, even to my surprise, he's still using the cast from this. From my understanding, he doesn't use them that much longer, a couple episodes in, and then that switches. Around the World would only be on Broadway for 2 months. So they had about a month and a half left, a month left from here. So my guess is when people split. A little bit of background on this particular show, Daryl, as you were talking about, this is sort of a spin-off of Wells's 1938 show, of Mercury Theater of the Air. And this version is 30 minutes, as you mentioned, but it's still sort of the same thing. It's like adaptations of classical literature. Mm-hmm. My daughter wants to also share, apparently. Anyway, so yeah, the other thing is that Wells mentions in his commentaries that he had a hard time getting a sponsor. He claims because he was too political. I sort of doubt that, especially given the sponsor that they ended up getting, which is Pabst Blue Ribbon, which at this point is a pretty big beer. Yeah. And they apparently wanted Wells for his showmanship, and that plays into this sort of focus on classical literature. Contrary to my college days and my college friends who think of Pabst Blue Ribbon as a sort of cheap beer. It was not marketed that way. Certainly, it was the sort of champagne of beers, if we can take Miller's sort of slogan. They have these beautiful sort of people drinking them out of like nice glasses with shrimp cocktail and stuff like that. I actually went back to see how much Pabst Blue Ribbon ran for. There's the New York Public Library has this beautiful archive of menus, and it ranged like broadly. In today's money, some places would sell Pabst for $14 a pint. And the cheapest I found was about just under $5. And so it's not this cheap beer. You're not slugging it down in tailgates necessarily, at least not in New York City. The other thing that's strange, and I've listened to this series quite a bit, is you'll notice that the speaker mentions that you can't always get Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I've never thought about that, but 1946, essentially what we're dealing with here is two things. One is still sort of post-war rationing. We think of rations as the war, but this continued. And so they had a hard time getting grain. And so they were just basically telling consumers, ask for it, so we can say there's a big demand. But also Pabst, I found their stockholder sort of letters in 1946, and they had a hard year in other ways. Like they, as a company, they couldn't find glass. They also had this like weird delivery problem in New York area especially. And so it was sort of this hodgepodge of problems. And so when you see the speaker several times mention ask, that's just like a very unique case in 1946 post-war. So that's what most interested me about this episode. I will say it was sort of like the Bible for me, where I just liked hearing Wells talk. I loved the part where he's in the cave. I didn't particularly like anything else. I thought it was way too quick, but he could have just been stuck in that cave and talked to me for another 30 minutes. That would have been good.
That's the thing. Orson makes everything just whenever he speaks, it's like, oh, this is really good. It doesn't matter what he's saying or what the show's going on or anything. I will say about Pabst Blue Ribbon before I move on to anybody else. I've got this sound file that had been roaming around my computer forever that I think I've long lost it, but it was a famous actor. I can't remember which actor and which movie this was in, but he says, F. Heineken, Pabst Blue Ribbon is like the ultimate drink, and I just thought like that's a great little sound bit. And I don't even know, like I say, what movie it's from. I mean, anyway, I'm sure somebody out there knows that piece of dialogue because it's very famous, and can write us in and say, oh, that was from this movie, and I'll be like, okay. Anyway, let's move on. We've got let's go to John. What did you think about this one?
I love the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, and the 2002 movie is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I think it's so great. I've never read the book. Maybe I should do that next. I
hear it's not nearly as good as the movie, so there you go. No.
I like the sort of like theater of the mind, especially with the prison stuff and the sound effects. The production is really well done. I also like how it's sort of told out of order, which you see a lot in modern. You don't even notice it anymore. But like starting with the ending, basically, where the introduction of him as the Count of Monte Cristo, and then going back and seeing how they got there and things like that. I wonder if the summer series here is sort of a best of the 1938 series, because they had done this before in 1938. And that one is an hour long, so it's even better. And even then, in that one, he says, oh, here's a humble 57 minutes of the Count of Monte Cristo. So even that, you can tell he's having trouble squeezing it down to an hour. So then to squeeze it to a half an hour, it's even harder, especially with a story like this. I often like those like Lux Radio theaters where you get a half an hour of a movie and it's like, you know what, that's all I needed of that rom-com or whatever. But with this, I feel I would have loved, like a long mini series of like a 10-part or 20-part even. I think that would have been great in half an hour chunks, because I find this story so fascinating, and all the different parts you could expand on, and it would be even better. But I still enjoyed it, even at a half an hour. Listening to the 1938 one, it's interesting. Not like you could listen to the episode and it's good, but I really found the introduction interesting that Orson Welles gives to it. And one of the things he says is that Among hundreds of Dumas plots that persist, the most ingenious tall story ever perpetrated by the mind of man is the Count of Monte Cristo. So
that's great, John. Well, and to dovetail into what John's saying there, I think it's really the one thing I'm really glad does exist is I think it's his first work in radio that we have. Maybe I think it precedes Mercury Theater. Even is his presentation of. I'm trying to remember
The
story.
Shadow.
No, Jean Valjean.
Les Mis.
Les Mis. So he presented Les Mis as a 6-part miniseries back in 1937, and it's a delightful presentation, and it doesn't have the truncated feel of everything else because it is a 5 or 6 parts. I can't remember. And it's all preserved, and we have it, and it sounds pretty darn good and everything. And so it's very listenable. I listen to that every once in a while and get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So that's just another, it's neat how Orson played with the different lengths and the different things you can do with radio and presenting some things. He never, I don't think, ever presented a truncated version of Les Mis, though. Tried to do that in a half hour, an hour, or anything that I can think of. Unless anybody knows, but I don't remember him doing it on Mercury Theater or anything like that.
I feel like he did, but I can't remember. I just want to say too, John's point about this as sort of the best of the 1938 version. That's how he pitched it to sponsors. As with anything Wells and sponsors, I feel like that's always just a pitch. There's an original, completely original play later in this series that was not based on anything. So he sort of he just gets his spot and he does what he wants. I will say though, as much as we ragged on the Around the World adaptation, I went back and looked at reviews. They were glowing. They were far better reviews than actually the stage play. Wow. And so, maybe it is the best of, I don't know. But anyway, I was surprised to find that out.
Well, and I do think if you're reviewing things at the time, I would think all of a sudden you see Orson's coming up with the Mercury Theater essentially again. You're going to be really on board with that and going, well, just to get Orson doing these things that he hasn't done in close to a decade and presenting some great great dramas and things is definitely worthwhile, and we want to see that. I mean, at that point, radio is dominated by the comedies and or the soap operas and a million other things, and so I think getting this is probably refreshing to the critics at the time, I would assume. Kathy, go ahead.
You're absolutely right. Summertime in radio was the pits. All the shows,
they're all over.
My undergraduates don't understand this at all about the sort of seasonality that, sort of 3-channel broadcasting used to be. And it was the same in radio, that Jack Benny went off the air every May or June, and all the replacement shows were light little crap, sometimes a way of trying out somebody. But, somebody new, but very low expectations. And so, because there weren't reruns either, because everything back in was supposed to be done live. So they said they had to come up with something. And so, indeed, radio was at its highest popularity. And what a breath of fresh air this would be, So do we know what network this ran on? Do we know if he also sold this to ABC, or I'll do some research. I'll find out.
I can't remember.
I can't either.
I'll go find it. But indeed, I know what the critics undoubtedly would be going, oh, thank God, this is not a quiz show for money, or
yes.
Stop the music, or the other things that would throw Fred Allen off the air. So hooray for good programming in the summer.
So, yeah,
great point.
And it was so rare. I'm surprised more people didn't use it as like a launching pad to other things. I mean, you had, like, the only person I can think of that did that was in 1947. You had Jack Parr replaced
Exactly.
Jack Benny in the summer.
Benny for the summer,
And that
right.
was a series that got a lot of notoriety and really established Jack Parr. And then, of course, he'd later go on to be the second host of the Tonight Show for a while. And
Didn't Stan Freberg also do that?
yes, Stan Freberg too had a summer series. That's right. That was quite later. That was 56 or something.
I think he replaced Jack Benny. I think when he went off the air.
Yeah, you're right. He did.
I looked it up. It's CBS.
Wow. Okay. So, right as CBS is trying to ramp up, they would do the talent raids at the end of 48. So,
yeah, 48, 49
so-
kind of period. Yeah. So, yeah. And so the first thing they got was Orson. We gotta get Orson. So, yeah.
But I also sort of wonder as if Orson didn't do this because he needed the money.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He definitely did.
so-
I mean, yeah. No, that's for sure. I mean, the other thing to remember. He mentions it one time in the next commentary, but he's a single man at this point, and he's going through a divorce with Rita Hayworth, and so she's going after his stuff. I mean, understandably so. In fact, she gets a large stake of Around the World, which in some ways, thankfully for Wells, didn't do that well. But I think money's
There
on
you
his
go,
mind.
Rita.
Exactly.
Well, that reminds me of Marvin Gaye when he got divorced. And so she got the profits or a decent amount of the next album that comes out. And so he creates an album called Here, My Dear. And it's all about their divorce, every song. And so it doesn't sell all that well or anything, but I thought that was just the ultimate, like, here, my dear, here you go, take what you get of this thing. And, which is an interesting listen, I will say that. I mean, he didn't totally, it's just strange subject matter to be going through. But like, I think it talks about leaving it his wife, and then it talks about his mistresses and lots of things in the actual album. Interesting album. So anyway, let's go to Terry. Terry, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I had to do some research because I didn't know who this mathematician named Monte Cristo was, but then I realized that I'd actually read the book, so it put things in perspective for me. I will also say that I have been in that cave on the Chateau d'If where the story took place. It was in 1974. I was a student in France, and a friend of mine and I, a fellow student, and I missed our boat back to Marseille, and we ended up sharing a ride back with a group of Russian tourists, Soviet tourists. And that was, I think, maybe the first time I'd ever met anyone from the Soviet Union. But that has nothing to do with this story. Daryl, I agree with you. This must have been a great challenge for Orson Welles and whoever he worked with to adapt this enormous work, much longer than even most American or English language versions of the Count of Monte Cristo are. And there is no right answer, in my opinion, of how much to leave in and how much to cut out, because those who love the whole book will say, well, but yeah, you didn't tell this part of the story.
Yeah.
And others will say, yeah, but all that other stuff's too long. So it is what it is, as a famous man once said. And I thought
it
he
almost
did
seems
great
like an adaptation of the earlier version, because there's
yeah
that are the same.
Well, which would be the easiest way to do it, right? I mean, if you're going to do this, I'd be like, oh, I've got an hour version sitting here. All I have to do is cut that hour version down to a half hour. I don't have to deal with the whole book and what I'm going to do. I just deal with that, and that would seem.
And every one of our audio plays that we've cobbled together have faced this same question, which is how long is too long? Daryl, as you pointed out, in the early parts of this series, it's going to end up being hours and hours long. So. Even in this era of binge watching of a TV series, you can't really impose that much length on the average listener, or even on most listeners.
Right.
My only sticking point with this was that the end of this episode, Wells' conclusion was different than the conclusion of the entire novel by Alexander Dumas, and so. is it the right ending? Well, it was a Wells ending. It's his story, his adaptation of an adaptation of a famous story. But I think every story has to be taken as it is. You either like it or don't like it, and
yeah.
And it was Orson Welles anyway. It was Orson Welles. How much can you hate this? It was an auditory treat, and I'm even at his worst, I'm always happy listening to Orson Welles.
Exactly. Well, and I was thinking, boy, the way to make this where Terry would hate it is if you had it be Rod Serling doing this.
So,
because he
Daryl
can't,
and Terry,
we all know that. So, anyway, go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, so Wells did commonly adapt his own adaptation. So the other one I'm thinking of is he did a Heart of Darkness on the radio twice, and his 1946 version is actually an adaptation of his unmade 1939 film version. And so he would take whatever was essentially the shortest, most condensed, although his 1938 Heart of Darkness version was only 30 minutes. So it's sort of strange that he would adapt the film version, not his other radio version. But anyway, he commonly did that. So it's very possible that this is simply an adaptation of his previous adaptation.
Well, and speaking of everything, and speaking of in time lengths of everything and so forth, I just, now that I realize it, next summer is when it's going to be the anniversary of that Les Mis that Orson did. And I think that'll be, if we continue, hopefully we'll still be doing these by the time next summer hits. And if we are, we'll definitely focus on that. And I think that would be fun for all of us to talk about, because to me, it's the first thing that's like binge watchable, I mean, listenable in the way that so many things are. It kind of predicts, in the way Orson does so often, of what's going to come in the future, is because I don't know, I can't think of any other miniseries that's been done in radio, certainly not in 1937. And to have a multi-part piece that works together so well, and then now to everything you watch that's on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever you're going to catch, if it's made for streaming, they don't have the budget to do 22 episodes or whatever, and so you get 8 or you get 7 or whatever it is, and they kind of usually have an arc to them and tell one complete story a season, and that's exactly what he was doing in 1937. So
there is precedent for this. I mean, prior to all of the things that we're listening to these days, of course, there were and are still audiobooks, and there are abridged and unabridged versions of books. So if you have only a few hours to listen to a book, you get the abridged version. If you don't mind spending 15 or 20 or more hours listening to a book, there's the unabridged version. I have yet to finish recording Murder at the Altar. The length of the finished product, it's the effort it takes to produce it properly.
Something else that I learned from listening to the intro that Orson Welles gave to the 1930s version of this was that the original story was actually published in the newspaper in segments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, and as you guys have said, this is such an interesting piece of time for Orson, and I think it's great. So I think we'll go ahead and let the folks listen to it, and we'll move on from there. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you guys next week for more Orson. Describe the Jack Benny book that's going to be coming out, because our Orson Welles audience maybe hasn't heard much about it.
Oh, well, this is true. Well, speaking of the 700 and some existing Jack Benny episodes that will keep you, Daryl, and you, John, busy for 20 years, there happen to be 250 episodes for which we don't have recordings. And the Jack Benny estate gave me permission to go into the bowels of the UCLA library and photograph these missing, what I call the missing broadcasts. They are the ones from his earliest years, 1932 to 36, in which the Benny character is forming, lots of things that become so solidified, all the gears working together to make a brilliant show by the time we pick it up in about late 36, 37. It's interesting to see the Benny and his first writer, Harry Kahn, experiment Some things don't work, some things do. You can see Jack become cheaper over time. I was just looking at an episode where he's bragging about the $100 Palm Beach suit he's wearing for a late spring episode set in New York. It's like, Jack is never going to brag about a $100 suit, not the Jack we know, but that's part of the fun of this. And I'm getting volume 2 ready to go into production. So hopefully it will be out by the end of the summer. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Kathy, in the first volume, Jack was releasing shows twice a week at that point, or was it more?
Yes, and it's still when Canada Dry was the sponsor, he was on the air twice a week. Now he worked with a band, and there were 5 to 6 musical numbers in the show. So the amount, the verb, the text, the jokey part of the script is only about 15 pages long.
Right.
Given your earlier talk about, a 30-page script. So, he and Harry Kahn didn't have to write as much, but you just had to keep it going. And that's indeed how he started developing something that would become like a workplace sitcom. Eventually, the show pretty quickly becomes something, hey, we're in a radio studio, we're putting on a radio show with music. And so I'm going to talk to the band leader and the people in the band. I'm going to talk to the singer. I'm going to hire myself a secretary to handle all my copious fan mail, which we know from a 1954 episode.
Yes, yes.
Things he never had much of. So.
Well, and it's great. And then so the second book is still the same Canada Dry.
Yes, this is the second book. It features the actual romance of the Jack and Mary characters. They, connecting to the Jack Benny episode we've done earlier today, they actually in 2 episodes express their love for each other and like sigh, and it suddenly become a romantic comedy. And apparently Benny and Harry Kahn go, what the hell have we done? I connected to the moonlighting thing, right, where that successful show with Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis seemed to have jumped the shark when the 2 characters fell in love, and it ruined the tension of the show. So pretty quickly, within like 2 episodes, they stopped that. But it is interesting to see Jack and Mary actually be lovey-dovey.
Right.
So
well, that creates a whole new slant on things, because John and I haven't really announced it, but we were thinking about doing some recreations of these episodes, and with John being Mary and me being Jack, and those 2 episodes will be awkward for us, I would think, a little bit, but that's all right. We're gonna.
I thought that was just between you and me.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Did I let the cat out of the bag? That's okay. Anyway, onwards and upwards.